Ended up getting 12 pints. So, no. Are those half pints? Pints. Pints. Ended up getting 12 pints. For example, we were recently in New Hampshire and their Walmart up there sold chicken feed. Our Walmart down here doesn't sell chicken feed. You're supposed to store your jars with the bands removed, and that's because... Hey, what's up? My name is Crystal, and in this video I'm going to be showing how I make applesauce. I'm making unsweetened applesauce using our 18-quart roaster. I had intended on using our crock pot, but quickly realized that it's way too small to handle the amount of apples that I had gotten. We went apple picking. We've actually gone 3 times now. This was with the second round of apples that I made applesauce with. And I also ended up using up some older apples that were in our fridge from the store. So the kids frequently just go in and grab fruit that they want to eat from the fruit drawer. And sometimes the apples get lost in the shuffle of the bags and stuff in there, and so I ended up using those apples too. The recipe I'm using is from the book that I use a lot. It's not the only canning book I have, but it's the one I use frequently. It's the complete book of home preserving from Ball. I have it linked down in the description. It's on Amazon. It's really not that expensive, and there are tons of recipes in it that are really versatile, and you can customize them to your tastes or wants or needs when you're making your own food. For this video, we're using the applesauce recipe on page 180. It calls for 12 pounds of apples. I actually wasn't even sure how many pounds of apples I had because I just totally forgot to weigh how many apples I had. So I took a guess on what we had and ended up estimating about how much lemon juice I should be adding. The recipe is for 12 pounds of peeled quartered apples treated in the anti-browning solution, which is a mixture of water and lemon juice. And then for the 12 pounds of apples, you add 4 tablespoons of lemon juice. And then for that, if you wanted to add sugar, you would add 3 cups of sugar. I think that the apples are plenty sweet enough, so we don't add any extra sugar. Customize it however you want and the way that you like it. I'm also doing it a little differently this time. I usually use the quart size jars for applesauce, but I realized they would end up going bad, so I would open them up and then they would end up sitting in our refrigerator for a little too long and they would start to get yucky. So I ended up using pint jars this year just so we could open it at the table, sometimes start and finish it in one sitting. The pint size jars just end up getting eaten more quickly than a quart size jar. Ended up getting 12 pints. So no, are those half pints? Pints. Pints. Ended up getting 12 pints. Just like our other canning videos, I will have the timestamps down in the description along with the links to many of the things that I am using in the video. That way you can find it for yourself and get it if you find it helpful. I don't have canning jars linked, and that's only because I have yet in the years that I've been doing this to find canning jars at an affordable price on the internet. So I usually just pick them up at Walmart or Target, and Tractor Supply also has them, so if we're in there getting chicken feed or goat feed or something, then I can pick up a case if we really need it. But Target and Walmart usually have the best prices for those things, and I'm easily able to add it to a grocery pickup order, so I don't even need to go into the store. I know everybody's Walmarts and Targets and Tractor Supplies are different depending on the areas that you live in. For example, we were recently in New Hampshire and their Walmart up there sold chicken feed. Our Walmart down here doesn't sell chicken feed. Please remember to do the YouTube-y things, like, subscribe, and share. We really appreciate it and it helps us out a lot. And with that, we'll get into it. Let's start with the supplies and ingredients I'm using to make and can the applesauce. I'm using our large roaster. Our other slow cookers won't fit all of these apples, so I'll be able to cook all the apples at once. I'm using a hand blender this time, apple peeler, a water bath canner. You do not need one. You can use a very large stock pot and a lid. Just make sure you have some sort of rack on the bottom just to prevent the jars from clanking around directly on the bottom of the pot. Canning jars. I'm using this new case of regular mouth pint jars. It comes with the lids and bands already, but if you're reusing jars, make sure they aren't cracked in any way and that you have the right sized replacement lids and bands that hold them in place. A canning funnel, ladle, bubble tool that also measures headspace, jar grippers, a towel for your countertop, a lint-free rag like a t-shirt or flour sack towel, distilled white vinegar for cleaning rims, and then this is the ingredients I'm using to make the applesauce. We've got a whole bunch of apples, bottled lemon juice, and water. We aren't adding any additional sugar to this recipe, we're just making unsweetened applesauce. First, we're washing all the apples. I'm also using the apples that are in our fridge from the store. The kids usually take fruit out of our fruit drawer daily, but sometimes they end up in the bag lost and forgotten. So I'm adding some of those too. Then I make up a solution of water and lemon juice to help prevent the apples from browning too much. It's 8 cups of water and a half cup of lemon juice. This is my apple peeler. I don't usually use the corer and the slicer attachment, but I do for applesauce. As I peel and slice the apples, I'm adding them to that lemon water solution. Once all the apples are peeled and cored and treated to prevent browning, I drain the apples and add them to our slow cooker. I'm adding water to just cover the apples and cook them on low all day. It makes the house smell really nice, especially on a fall day. After cooking down all day, I ladled the excess water out of the slow cooker, so all that is left is the apples. I forgot to film that part though. So all I did was take a ladle and press down so only water went into it and just drained it out. In the past, I usually use our hand mill, but today I'm using our hand blender to puree the apples into applesauce. We prefer more of a smoother consistency of applesauce, but you can leave it a little chunky if you like. Now would be the time to add the sugar if you wanted to. I'm not adding any sugar, so I'm just going to be adding the lemon juice. I'm turning the slow cooker up to high and covering it while I get the jars ready. Now I'm ladling the applesauce into the jars, leaving a 1/2 inch of headspace. Then we need to make sure the rim is clean of any applesauce so that the lids seal to the jars properly. To do that, I take a lint-free cloth, so a t-shirt rag or a flour sack towel, and some distilled white vinegar and clean the rim of the jar. Then place a new, clean lid onto the jar. To hold the lid in place while the jars are processing in the canner, we use the metal bands or rings. Using just the tips of your fingers, tighten the band down until resistance is met, and then tighten a little further. This is called finger tight. There is no need to tighten any more than that. Now I'm going to fill the rest of the jars. As I fill the jars, I am placing them around the water bath canner as it preheats. This keeps the jars hot before putting them in the water bath canner. Once the canner is ready, I add the jars, put the lid on, and wait for it to come up to a rolling boil. When the water is at a steady boil, I make sure the lid is on well and then set the timer for 20 minutes. This is the time it takes for the jars to process in the water bath canner. After 20 minutes, I turn the burner off. Holding it like a shield to protect your face from getting steam blasted, remove the lid from the water bath canner. Then, we let the jars sit in the canner for an additional 5 minutes. This lets the jars cool off slightly before moving them to a towel on the counter. After the 5 minutes is up, I lift the jars out of the canner and one by one move the jars to a towel on the countertop. I still have more jars to process, so I'm going to add those to the canner. If you're ever doing multiple batches like this, it's good to keep in mind that water will be lost through the steam, so you will most likely need to add more water back to the water bath canner. These will sit on the counter for at least overnight, sometimes longer depending on what's going on. Then I remove the bands, label them, and store them in our pantry. So that's it. That's how we make applesauce. It's really simple. It's really, really simple. I kind of talked about it, I think, in the video, but I added a lot more water than you would for if you were cooking them on the stove. Really, you just want to add enough water so that the apples don't stick to the pot and they don't stick together. So you really don't need much water at all, but because I was going to be outside doing things and not hanging out in the kitchen very much while those sat in the roaster, I really didn't want to risk burning them. So I made sure that I added a lot more water, and it just was to cover the apples. So I ended up ladling out all that water. It was really easy to do. You just take a small bowl or a ladle and you just press it down into the apples and just let the water in, and you just ladle out the water. Of course, I didn't film it when I did it because I wasn't thinking about it, but as you can see here, the applesauce is not at all watery, and it's really nice to know what went into it, the ingredients. All I did was let them sit on my counter overnight, and then I took the bands off, added labels. I used my label maker. It does, we realize, leave a residue underneath if you use a label maker, but it comes off fairly easy. They do make these dissolvable labels that Ball makes. You're supposed to store your jars with the bands removed, and that's because when you leave the bands on the jars, when the jar may not be completely sealed, it will give a false seal effect, and so it's just safer to store them with no band on it. And you can test it a lot easier by just doing that. Give it a little shake, make sure that the lid is on there really good, and the pop top will be pressed down, and you should be able to shake it around like that. That'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for joining me today while I made applesauce. I really appreciate you, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!